Mary glanced at her watch, her anxiety growing with each passing second. Her baby was supposed to be brought to her for feeding half an hour ago, but no one had come yet. She could hear the cries of other mothers' babies being brought to them, but where was her daughter? The woman was worried, unable to find her place in this chaotic world. It felt as if someone had ripped her heart out of her chest and was now relentlessly trying to tear it apart. "They'll bring your beautiful daughter," a neighbor in the ward tried to calm her down. "She won't disappear. Don't worry so much." But her words did little to soothe Mary's troubled mind. It was easy for her neighbor to say, her baby was right next to her, they weren't separated. Mary couldn't get enough of her long-awaited daughter. The thought of her being far away was driving her crazy. The neighbor even laughed, telling Mary to rest while she could instead of pacing around the ward. But something was pushing in her chest, a warning of something bad. Maybe her intuition was trying to protect her from something. Mary's daughter was taken away again because she had high levels of bilirubin in her blood and needed phototherapy sessions. The doctors had said they would shine the lamp one last time and not separate her from her mother anymore. Unable to bear her anxiety any longer, Mary approached the nurse. But the nurse looked away strangely and told her to wait. Her heart was beating faster and faster. She barely held back tears. When the doctor came, he whispered that little Diana had disappeared. Mary fainted in the next second. How could they lose a baby in the maternity ward? Where would she have gone from there? When Mary came to, she thought it was some kind of cruel joke. But she realized it wasn't. Fate had been unfair to them. They searched for her daughter everywhere, literally turning the maternity ward upside down. Mary's husband, Lance, arrived as soon as she returned to a somewhat normal state and was able to tell him the terrible news. All the staff at the maternity ward checked every corner, but the little girl was nowhere to be found. The only conclusion that came to mind was that the baby had been kidnapped. Kidnapped? Mary whispered, her voice barely audible. Why would anyone kidnap her? We don't have millions. Lance is just a simple worker, and I worked as a journalist at the local newspaper before taking maternity leave. Did someone decide to take revenge for a wrong article? Doctors and police closed all entrances and exits and began to check all the staff and patients in the maternity ward. The policeman considered initiating a murder case. What if one of the nurses accidentally killed the baby and tried to get rid of her? The thought crossed Mary's mind, but she didn't allow herself to dwell on it. She knew she could go crazy with despair. As long as there was hope in her chest, living was much easier. The doctors prescribed sedatives to Mary to calm her down a little. But no tablets could heal the wounds on her soul, get rid of the grief that tore her heart into pieces. Mary thought and thought, but nothing came to mind. The police managed to identify the only suspect, a 30-year-old midwife named Alana. The motives for kidnapping the child were, of course, not understood by anyone, but the woman did not appear at work for 3 days after the incident. So they began to search for her. Neighbors knew nothing about Alana, saying that 4 days ago, she had sold her apartment in a hurry for practically nothing and said goodbye to them. They all thought she had finally found happiness in life and moved to another city, as no one had ever seen her as happy as on the day of her departure. Opinions on Alana differed. Someone said she was a good, responsible executive, that she had a huge, pure soul. Others frowned and said Alana was always closed off, alienated, and nervous. But they couldn't say anything bad about the woman. She drank alcohol like everyone else on holidays, didn't have an addiction to illegal substances, didn't steal, didn't fight, wasn't involved in brawls, and wasn't on the register of the psychiatric hospital. Alana's mother had died 5 years ago, and her ex-husband refused to meet with the police. He said he already had another family and didn't know anything about his ex-wife. The police couldn't force the man to talk, but it was unlikely he would cover for his ex-wife. However, the police established surveillance of the man to make sure he didn't hide anything and didn't cover for the criminal. Unfortunately, surveillance didn't yield anything. The man was as clean as a whistle and had nothing to do with Alana. Mary felt like a part of her soul was dying with each passing day. Of course, hope always remains until the last, but the woman doesn't know where to look for her daughter. Now, Mary regretted allowing the child to be taken away. She should have sat there next to her daughter, watching over her. Every day, Mary's husband, Lance, would start drinking, sometimes blacking out completely. He attempted to control himself, but occasionally, he would break down and accuse her of everything. He blamed her for not protecting their child and for not being by their daughter's side during procedures instead of lying in the ward and resting. When Lance was in a better state, he was always supportive of his wife. He knew that only together could they cope with the pain, but he couldn't control himself when he was overwhelmed by thoughts of their daughter not being alive anymore. At first, Mary didn't pay attention to these reproaches and accusations, but soon she began to take them to heart. She should have checked on little Diana instead of falling asleep. However, no one could say for certain what would have happened if they had gone back in time. Perhaps it was fate. Perhaps their daughter would have disappeared under other circumstances. Perhaps Mary didn't deserve to be a mother. She blamed herself and swallowed sedatives, sometimes sinking into a bitter unconsciousness. She would sit and stare at one spot for days on end. Lance tried to talk to his wife and encourage her to be more active. He suggested she start writing articles for her newspaper, but it seemed to him like he was talking to a wall. He tried to support her, but gave up under the weight of everyday life. Looking into her glassy eyes, he allowed despair to overwhelm him and turned to the bottle, thinking it was his salvation. Instead, he started drowning in it. Alana, the midwife who kidnapped Mary's daughter, could not be happier with her cleverness. After all, she finally achieved what she had been dreaming of for so long, becoming a mother. Holding the tiny, crying baby wrapped in a blanket close to her, the woman tried to understand the raging excitement. She just couldn't believe her luck. How easy and fast everything had worked out for her. Nobody even suspected anything, and if they found out now what she had done, they wouldn't be able to find her because she had escaped far away, too far away. And here, in this godforsaken place, nobody would dare to disturb her happiness. Alana had prepared everything in advance, buying baby clothes, a crib, formula, and plenty of powdered milk, which she periodically replenished. The hastily renovated abandoned forester's house near the dying village became a perfect place to hide. Getting to the village wasn't that far away, and it was there that Alana decided to buy groceries when they ran out. After all, nothing terrible would happen to the child if she left her alone for 2 or 3 hours. But the woman didn't have time to think about what would happen when the baby grew up a little. She decided she would solve all problems as they arose. And one day, during Mary's delivery, Alana realized that the time had come. She didn't know why she was drawn to this particular child, but she was waiting for just such a moment, a sign from above. And when they took the baby for procedures once again and left her alone for a while, Alana committed this terrible act. She couldn't be happier with the genius of her plan. The woman understood that she wouldn't be able to adopt a baby from the orphanage because there were already long queues for them and they preferred full families. But after an unsuccessful first marriage, Alana didn't plan to start a family. She decided that the baby whom the heavens would surely send her would become her family. And then she saw Diana and realized that this was the sign she had been waiting for so long. At first, Alana couldn't get enough of the baby. As soon as this little girl was born, the woman immediately felt a kindred soul in her. Her heart chose her. Coping with the role of a mother turned out to be not easy at all, but Alana lived as if on one breath. She fluttered like a butterfly and enjoyed these incredible feelings. But the feeling of euphoria had to pass someday. The woman's thoughts of what her life could have been like without this child, the realization that it is not her baby and may never become her own, and the belief that this act was wrong finally began driving her insane. Alana became afraid of every sound and rustle. If there was a strong wind outside, she flinched at the sound of branches hitting the window, fearing that someone had finally found her and come for the baby. Her happiness quickly turned into hellish torment, her heart tearing into pieces. Alana looked at the baby, but no longer felt like her mother. It was a strange child. The woman even began to feel the depression that usually happens to new mothers. Alana didn't know what to do with the baby next. Looking at the crying baby begging for food, Alana grew angry with her from time to time. Sometimes she would go to the village for groceries for 5 hours, if not more. She understood perfectly well that when she returned, she would again experience that oppressive feeling of loneliness and all-consuming void. The child had become annoying, and something urgent needed to be done. Alana lost a lot of weight and turned into a real shadow. She hated herself and her life, constantly thinking about how everything could have turned out differently. She realized that she was tired of being a mother. She no longer wanted to change the little girl's diapers, and there was no money left for them. She didn't want to feed her, and she no longer wanted to listen to the endless, maddening, non-stop crying. Everything was just too much. And then Alana made up her mind. She wrapped the child in an old cloth, hitchhiked to the city, and then went to the address where the baby's mother was supposed to live. The woman didn't know why she memorized the address. She just remembered it, and that was it. Alana was afraid of getting caught by the police on the way, and going to jail was the last thing she wanted. And she sincerely hoped that by returning the child to her mother, she could continue to live as she had before. After all, she was doing just fine before that. Well, things didn't work out with her beloved man, but the sun didn't revolve around him. Well, she didn't have a child, and he already had a full-fledged family, so what? Not a big deal. Dragging herself from the bus stop to the entrance, angry at her uncomfortable shoes that rubbed her feet raw, the hungry girl's cries, and everything around her, Alana was ready to throw the baby away, leave her on a bench, do anything just to get rid of her company as soon as possible. Alana fondly remembered her wedding with her beloved husband. They were happy together until a couple of months after the wedding when Alana found out she was pregnant. The young couple was overjoyed, but the birth was difficult and the baby never cried. Then Alana went crazy. Her head was spinning. All thoughts were confused in her mind. She wanted to howl with grief. The couple began to actively try to conceive a child, but nothing worked. Alana was examined and received a disappointing diagnosis: infertility. She refused to accept this and didn't tell her husband the truth. They actively tried to conceive a child again and again, but to no avail. One day, her husband discovered the examination results hidden in the attic, including the doctor's conclusion. He didn't talk to his wife for long, just twiddled his finger at his temple and said that Alana had become obsessed. He left her, and Alana continued to unsuccessfully try to conceive a child. She met many other men, but failed to find someone who could father her child. She even attempted to adopt a baby, but was rejected. Then one day, Alana made a terrible decision, stealing a baby she considered her own. But, of course, she didn't think of many things, and most importantly, that she wasn't able to love someone else's baby. After searching for the correct entrance for a long time, Alana finally found it and hurried inside when an elderly couple came out. Once on the second floor, she pressed the doorbell button and waited for someone to answer. Mary opened the door, and Alana didn't immediately recognize her as both women had changed drastically in the last 6 months, and not for the better. Without giving Mary a chance to react, Alana handed her the baby, saying, "Take your daughter back. I don't need her anymore. I'm tired of her." Mary was stunned, holding the baby in her arms, but not understanding what had just happened. She didn't know who this woman was or why she had given her the baby. While Mary was still trying to process everything, Alana hurriedly left, not giving Mary a chance to ask any questions. Once the door was closed, Mary stared at the baby, trying to understand what kind of cruel fate had brought her here. She hadn't been expecting anyone to visit, as her husband had left her just a few hours before, telling her that he was tired of her depression and that she should live alone if she continued to hope of getting her child back. It was probably long dead. The relationship with her husband had become too tense over these 6 months, and Mary was even glad that he had decided to leave, thinking that at least he could continue to live and start a new life unlike her. When she heard the doorbell ring, Mary thought it was her husband, but it wasn't him. Now she didn't even know what to do with this strange gift. After a minute of shock, Mary put the baby on the bed and called her husband. "What do you want from me?" the man asked in a rough voice. Lance, Mary said, her voice trembling. I don't know what to do. She just brought me a baby and said it's our daughter. Lance, please help me. Are you out of your mind? Trying to manipulate me by using a child? Mary, stop raving about that child. Enough with this nonsense, Lance said, his voice cold. Lance, you don't understand, Mary pleaded. Without letting his wife speak, the man hung up and turned off his phone. Mary panicked and decided to call her mother. Though shocked by her daughter's words, the woman promised to come quickly since she lived nearby. The baby started to cry and Mary, feeling lost, picked her up. She didn't know how to handle a baby, what to do with her, or how to approach her. Soon after, Mary's mother arrived. She was dumbfounded when she saw the child and realized that her daughter wasn't crazy. However, she quickly pulled herself together and stated that the child was hungry. The woman went to the nearest store to buy food and clothes for the baby since the careless mother hadn't left any. When she returned, she handed Mary a box of formula and instructed her on how to prepare it. Boil the bottle to make sure everything is sterile, she added. Mary's mother then tended to the crying baby. Who is this little one we have here? You'll be eating in a couple of minutes, and meanwhile, let's put a diaper on you. Oh, you're wet. We'll take care of everything now, and then we'll look for your purr mommy. We'll figure out what happened to you, my little bun. Although you're such a skinny bun, like a herring, that's okay. We'll fatten you up. The woman turned the baby over and was shocked by how many diaper rashes there were. Her heart was bleeding as if someone was tirelessly puncturing it with a dull knife. Mary, come here. Do you have a big towel? We'll wrap this beauty. We'll have to bathe her and put baby oil all over her. Mary walked over and glanced at the baby. Her heart almost stopped when her gaze fell on a small, almost imperceptible birthmark on the girl's left shoulder. Mom, Mary gasped, tears streaming down her cheeks. This is my Diana. The birthmark is just like Lance's. Remember, I took a picture of it when she was born. This is our Diana. Mary began to cry, and surprisingly, the baby calmed down. After cleaning the baby, Mary didn't let go of her, constantly hugging and kissing her. She was afraid to let go of the baby and lose her again. It all felt like a strange dream, a nightmarish twist of fate, but even if it was a dream, she didn't want to wake up. We need to buy panthenol ointment. I'll go to the store again, and you watch the little girl for now. Can you believe this? I still can't, Mary's mother wailed and quickly left. Everyone was in shock from the intense emotions. No one could fully comprehend what was happening. It was necessary to contact the police and do a DNA test just in case. However, even without the test, it was clear that it was Diana, who was cruelly taken away from her mother and now was returned. Mary was incredibly happy. Her daughter was alive and had returned to her. Mary was angry at Alana, but she was happy that she returned the child to her instead of throwing her on the street or leaving her to die. Lance was walking down the street slowly. He felt a burning hatred towards himself. Tears streamed down his cheeks, and the best moments of his life with Mary kept flashing before his eyes. He still loved his wife, but he was tired of looking at the woman who was killed in grief. He was angry. He thought he was angry at her, but he was angry at himself. And now, after her call, the man could not find a place for himself. For the umpteenth time, he opened a photo of his daughter on his phone, the one that his wife sent after the baby's birth. Because of the tears that blurred his vision, he could hardly see anything. Deciding that he simply had to return and talk to his wife again and try to convince her that they needed to move on, Lance turned around. He suddenly got afraid that Mary would do something to herself if she lost him too, and he could not imagine a life in which she would not be there either. Yes, he had made many mistakes. They both did many bad things and said nasty things to each other, but their love was much stronger. Lance thought Mary's condition would have worsened if she called and said that they brought her some child. He had to be with his wife in this difficult moment. He had to support her and not allow her to go crazy. Lance decided he would fight for what was between them, before, after all, they promised each other not to leave each other in sorrow or joy until death do them part. The man hurried. He became scared at the mere thought that it would be too late. After reaching the required floor, Lance rang the doorbell. Mary did not open it for a long time, and he was frightened. The man began to search his pockets for keys. His hands were shaking, and the most terrible pictures of what could happen to his wife kept appearing in front of his eyes. However, the door opened, and Lance grabbed his wife in his arms and pressed her to himself, tears streaming down his face. Mary was stunned in his embrace and burst into bitter sobs. The man's heart was ready to stop in his chest. "Give me, Mary, forgive me. I shouldn't have left. I promised that we would cope with everything together and sorrow and enjoy ourselves. Mary, forgive me. Together we will cope with all this. Do you hear me? We will cope with all this," Lance kept apologizing, kissing his wife's tear-streaked cheeks. A woman was unable to answer anything because she heard a baby crying from the bedroom. Lance was frozen in place, unable to believe his ears. He hurried into the bedroom and saw the little one wrapped in his towel. The man barely kept himself on his feet. It was his daughter, Diana. Lance recognized her immediately. After all, she was his exact copy. He remembered perfectly all his childhood photos. The man fell to his knees and started crying. It didn't matter how the daughter returned. The main thing was that she was home and alive. Only in the evening, when the grandmother was taking care of the granddaughter, healing her rashes from diaper rash, did the spouses call the police. Alana was caught at midnight that same day. The woman aimlessly wandered around Central Square and didn't even try to hide. Since she immediately behaved inadequately, she was sent to a psychiatric hospital, and a few months later, during a court hearing, she was assigned to compulsory treatment for several years. The relationship between Mary and Lance was restored and became stronger than before. They never let their daughter go, even for a couple of meters. They guarded her like the most precious treasure in life and surrounded her with care and love. They understood that someday their daughter would fly out of the family nest, but for now, she was too small and defenseless. So the spouses protected her as the apple of their eye. 2 years later, they had a son. At that time, Mary gave birth together with her husband, who was in the delivery room. It was difficult to let go of the fears of the past, but the spouses worked on themselves. They went to a family psychologist and tried not to overshadow the lives of their children with their problems. Alana slowly came to her senses. She realized how terrible and wrong her actions were. The woman repented and asked for forgiveness from God. Now she dreamed of bringing at least some benefit to the world.